Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, I've got a treat for you. We're going to take a look at something that's not manga and not a science fiction show or fun little cartoon. Thomas Valiant by the Fourth Age Comics, a more traditional Western graphic novel. Now, you may notice it's a bit odd for me because, well, I don't do much in the way of reading or reviewing Western graphic novels or comics anymore. I'll get into that later. But first, writer-editor R.J. Shaw, art by Renzo Rodriguez, cover art Nick Axe, colors Paul Black and Ibrahim Aiden, letters Eric Weathers, copy editor Christina Lynn. And I'll just read the synopsis here. Formerly a member of the Legion of Justice, the hero once known as Putty Man has been cast aside by his mentor and branded a traitor by those he fought beside. But, gathering together his own team, he'll prove to the world that he's worthy of the title Hero. A man of many shapes, many secrets, and many faces, he is Thomas Valiant. Alright, I guess disclaimer, I'm a big fan of the writer R.J. Shaw. I started listening to his YouTube channel back in 2019. He did analysis of Western graphic novels and Western comics, and he answered a lot of questions that I'd had about them, and he actually kind of explained to me in technical terms the reasons I'd lost interest from them and wandered away from reading them, which I really appreciated. And so when he said that he was going to do a comic of his own, I was interested, but I wasn't expecting to get too much out of it because, well, I've never been the biggest fan of Western comics, but not to bury the lead, I really enjoyed this book. It grabbed me and kept me in the story in a way that not much media has for a long time. I wouldn't say I have exactly the same appreciation for Thomas Valiant as I do for, say, Kaiju number 8, but the core of my appreciation there is the same. This has the same sort of engaging, high-energy action, written at a level that keeps your brain guessing, but isn't too convoluted. Wholesomeness. I'd say this has a lot of the same energy that Kaiju number 8 does, despite being a vastly different medium. So, Thomas Valiant. I suppose I should say something about the shipping and packaging. The book arrived on time. It was fulfilled. Everything was exactly within the projected timelines. The book arrived almost completely undamaged. There was a little tiny bit of scuffing on like the one corner of the book, but I've held it in my hands. I've held it in sweaty fingers for a bit. The ink's not coming off. There's no rippling in the pages. This is a high quality comic book overall, technically. Now the story. I read you the summary. There's nothing more I need to say about that. One of the reasons I believe that YouTube suggested RJ of the Island to me was that he comments a lot on C.S. Lewis, which if you listen to this channel, you know that I do as well. And one of the primary bits of advice that Lewis gave to creators was don't worry about being original. Don't try to come up with an idea for a story that's completely original because A, you're not gonna. There are no original stories. And B, it doesn't matter. Worry about telling a good story. Focus on making the individual elements of your story good. Focus on putting them together well, and originality will come. And this, I've already compared this once to Kaiju number 8, but I'll do it again. It's a good comparison. This is a very standard example of its type, just like Kaiju number 8, and yet it transcends that mundane sameness. It is in much the same way that The Princess Bride was both a satire on swashbuckling romance adventures, but is also the best swashbuckling romance adventures. Although neither Thomas Valiant nor Kaiju number 8 are satires, they're just the really good examples of what the best of the genre is. Alright, story. It is a I don't know if I could say that without spoilers. Alright, so no spoilers. The story is a very standard archetype, and It's just very well played out. The author put a lot of research into the science, clearly, and there is one thing. Okay, if I have to make a negative, the point where the author shows that he has referenced the science, and in a way that most stories that use this element did not, was a bit on the nose. But that was just a very minor thing. It kind of gave me a sort of fourth wall smile, because it was done in such a way that it was a bit of a jab at those authors who don't take things like that into account. The story has the standard amount of plot twists and reversals from both this perspective of the audience and the characters. We get a couple rather, I wouldn't call them shocking, but rather surprising and eyebrow-raising moments. Then moving on to the artwork. So again, there's just not much more I can say about the story without going into spoilers. Now, this is where I have to give a big old honkin' disclaimer. One of the main reasons that I'm not a huge fan of Western comics, and I'm not a huge fan of the girlier shoujo manga, and I generally, really, in terms of graphic novels, I really only read very clean line art fighting shonen mangas, because my brain has serious overstimulation problems, and the colors and the line art and the general not cluttered backgrounds, the more defined backgrounds in Western comics, full of lines and angles and buildings and all of that stuff, it causes a feeling of discomfort in my brain as I'm processing it that really pulls me out of the story. When my mom saw me reading these more visually complex comics, she'd actually come over to see if I was all right, because she thought I was stressed out or angry or stressing about something. So with that said, I'm not the best person to judge the art of a Western comic. Overall, I enjoyed it. It's a bit dark for my taste. The one thing that I can point to is I really don't like this is the cover art, actually. Too many characters, too much is happening, all in muted browns and ambers. I'm not a huge fan of this style. Also, the characters seem to be put on the screen in direct opposition to what their actual screen time is in the book. So the most prominent characters are the ones who are least represented, and vice versa. So that's just, I'm not a fan of the cover, but who knows, maybe he'll come out with a variant cover. I only have one other thing to say about the art, other than that I generally liked it. There seems to be an inconsistency in the implied fluidity of motion of the characters between the pages. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. When somebody draws a character, the ability to draw a character dynamically so it looks like they're moving, so your brain looks at that and goes, oh yeah, that person is moving, is an art skill that takes years to master. Someone can be a competent artist drawing still life and not be able to draw a human in motion at all. And the first 2 pages of the comic, the one which is the chapter cover, and the one which is the big double page spread introduction, shows this the best. You see the main hero, Valiant. He's stretched out in his form, and he just looks stiff and awkward. And all of the characters, to one degree or another, they just look... what's the best way to put this? They're well drawn technically, but they just look unnatural somehow. And even the side characters, there's a couple who's reacting to the superhero fight going on around them, and they just look stiff. Okay, so, but the stiffness goes away as the book progresses. In the final pages, there's a final page where it's literally just people sitting in the room, feels more fluid and more dynamic than that first action page. Now, I've got 2 thoughts on this. One, it might have been deliberate, because as part of the plot, the main characters are undergoing moral and emotional changes, and this stiffness to fluidity might be reflecting the main character breaking apart from his past and embracing the more chaotic nature of his life going forward. I don't know. Or it might simply be the artist and the colorist working together as a team improved over the course of the book. So there's how many pages in this book? Oh, phooey, there's no page numbers in the book. Or no page numbers that I see. There's a lot of pages in the book. It could simply be that the artists got better. Again, one of the final scenes, a bunch of people sitting around in a room, literally just sitting there, and it's somehow more fluid and dynamic than the first action scene. Ironically, the giant energy snake seems to be the most fluid of the main characters in the first scene. Anyway, but again, like I said, I have poor visual perception when it comes to these kind of things. So take my criticism of the art style for what it's worth, i.e. not much. Now, what was it that caught me about this book? At first, I didn't know. I started reading it, well, primarily because I bought it. I felt kind of obligated to read it. But the story soon caught me up and kept me turning the pages. And it was subtle enough that I don't really know at what point I got so engaged that I couldn't put the book down. But one of the main reasons that I just gave up on Western comics was essentially Watchmen and the fallout from Watchmen. People point out that there are little moments of hope and wholesomeness in Watchmen, but that's like saying there's little pieces of chocolate on a giant pile of hot red peppers. Watchmen was, in a word, depressing. It physically depressed me. I felt morally ill after reading it. It affected me in much the same way that reading Animal Farm did. In much the same way, but worse than Hemingway's later works did. And that and I really don't claim to know about how and why and when that happened to the comics, but I've heard I actually wondered about it. I just thought maybe that I didn't have much of a taste for comics, but thanks to people like RJ and other comics reviewers, they kind of explained when and how this morbidity crept into comics. And especially one day I was listening to a comics reviewer and he started reviewing this older comic that explained it was a deconstruction of the superhero genre done by a master. It was very well done, very engaging, and I realized I knew exactly which book he was talking about and exactly which scene he was talking about. And he said that that was kind of the turning point for when comics started getting darker, more morbid, more depressing. Thomas Valiant does not have that. Bad things happen. There are false heroes. There are treasons. But it lacks that sense of utter depression that I was getting from Western comics, and which basically turned me off of them and turned me basically into only reading a very narrow line of Shonen Jump fighting manga. But I have gone on for long enough. I will end up having to save my full spoiler review for another video because I just have so much to talk about this. To summarize, this book captured me and held me hostage until I had finished it. It's a good book. I definitely suggest you check it out, buy it. Again, the link will be in the description. If you want another book that I hope is not depressing, check out my books. The link's below the video. Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, and Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote. And peace out, my wonderful viewers. Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, and Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. 2 books in a series of human absurdity. Go check out these short story collections. What will our little green friends think of us when we finally do make it to space? Find out the answer in 2 books of human absurdity. Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, and Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Google Play.